My parents left me a $100 million penthouse, but on my very first day there, my mother-in-law barged in, showing fake documents claiming the apartment was hers. When I tore them up, she slapped me hard, threw me into a car, and dumped me at a remote bridge, telling me to go to hell. I barely survived, but I returned, ready for revenge, and what happened next shocked her to the core. I never imagined my life would change in such a brutal way, not in a million years. It all started with the inheritance. My parents, who had always been the anchors in my life, passed away in a tragic accident. It was hard to even process, and in the middle of my grief, I was left with the most unexpected thing, a penthouse apartment worth $100 million in the heart of New York City. I remember standing in the penthouse for the first time after the funeral, my hands trembling as I ran them over the polished surfaces, the view of the skyline stretching endlessly before me. This place, filled with so many memories of my childhood, now felt like a heavy burden. It wasn't just a house, it was home, a place where my parents had raised me, a place that had witnessed my growth, my dreams, my failures. Now it was mine. But I didn't know how to hold on to it, not just physically but emotionally. I was lost in grief. Then there was Daniel, my husband, the one person I thought I could lean on during the darkest time of my life. Daniel, a 32-year-old marketing executive, had always been supportive, or so I thought. We had been married for 3 years, and I had envisioned us building a life together, sharing this home, and making it our own. My dream was to turn this penthouse into a warm, welcoming space, something that had always felt out of reach as a child. The idea of decorating every room, painting the walls in colors that would carry our memories, of one day hearing the sounds of children laughing, filled my thoughts with hope. But things changed. Daniel's family, his mother, Eva, and his sister, Claire, began to show a keen interest in the penthouse. At first, I thought it was harmless. They expressed their excitement about the inheritance, and I assumed they were just happy for us. But over time, it became clear that their interest wasn't as innocent as it seemed. I started to feel uneasy around them, like something was shifting, like they were more focused on the property than on my well-being. One afternoon, I was in the living room, sitting by the large windows that overlooked the city. I was sketching some ideas for how to renovate the penthouse, trying to ease my mind and find a way to move forward. The light was perfect, and for a moment, I let myself believe that this place could become a home again. Then, the door slammed open, and I looked up to see Eva and Claire standing there, their faces hard and unwelcoming. "Kara," Eva's voice was sharp, demanding. "We need to talk." I felt a cold shiver run through me as I stood up. My heart began to race, a sense of dread creeping in. What was this about? They had never barged into our home like this before. Eva's eyes were cold, and Claire's face was twisted in something between a sneer and a grin. They were holding papers, and I instinctively knew that whatever this was, it wasn't good. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to steady my voice, though I was already growing anxious. Eva didn't answer immediately. Instead, she shoved the papers into my hands. They were documents, legal-looking, professional. I glanced at them, my eyes scanning the words, but the more I read, the worse I felt. My stomach dropped. The documents weren't just some papers about property taxes or bills. They were fake legal documents, documents that claimed the penthouse was Daniel's family's property. The words felt like they were smacking me in the face, impossible to ignore. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice shaking as I looked up at them. "You can't just say this house belongs to you." Eva smirked, crossing her arms. "It's true, Kara. According to these papers, this penthouse now belongs to Daniel's family. You need to move out." I turned to Daniel, hoping, no, praying, that he would speak up, that he would stop this madness, but instead, he stood there, silent. His arms were crossed, and his face was expressionless, as if he were a stranger standing in the room with us. My heart sank. "Daniel, please," I said, my voice cracking as I reached out to him. "Please tell me this is a mistake. Please say something." But he didn't. He just stood there, cold and unmoving. The man I loved, the man I had married, wasn't there. It felt like he had disappeared, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. "Daniel?" I asked again, desperate.
Please, tell me you don't believe this.
Eva stepped forward, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Kara, this is for the best. You don't need this house. You don't need this burden. Let us take care of it." A surge of anger rushed through me. I couldn't let them take everything from me. Not after everything my parents had built. Not after the dreams I had for this place. This penthouse, filled with so many memories, was the last piece of my family I had left. And now they were trying to rip it away from me. "This is my home," I shouted, my voice rising in frustration. "I won't let you take it." Before I knew what was happening, Eva slapped me across the face. The sting of her hand on my cheek was nothing compared to the shock I felt. I stumbled back, my head spinning. I had never been hit like that before, not by anyone, let alone someone in my husband's family. I felt betrayed, devastated. The woman I thought was family, the woman who had been welcoming to me at one time, had just struck me. "Enough!" Claire yelled, emboldened by her mother's aggression. "Get out of here. This place belongs to us now." I couldn't move, frozen by the pain, the confusion, the betrayal. They started grabbing my things, my personal belongings, my sketches, anything they could find, and throwing them out of the door. I watched in shock as my life was tossed onto the street, like it didn't matter, like I didn't matter.
Leave.
Now, Daniel's mother barked, her words cold, final. I turned to Daniel one last time, my heart breaking. "Please help me," I begged. "Please, don't let them do this." But Daniel just stood there, still silent, his eyes avoiding mine. And in that moment I realized I had no one. Not anymore. They forced me into a car, driving me out of the city, away from the place I had once called home. They left me at a remote bridge, the cold air stinging my face. "Go to hell," Kara, Eva spat, as she slammed the car door. There I was, alone, devastated, and betrayed by the one person I had trusted most in the world. The cold air hit my face like a slap as I stood alone on the bridge, the sounds of the car speeding away echoing in my ears. My knees felt weak, and I could barely stand. I had never imagined that I would end up here, abandoned by my own husband and tossed aside like I meant nothing. I looked down at the empty street, surrounded by nothing but silence. The city I once loved now felt so distant, so foreign. How had everything gone so wrong? I didn't know how long I stood there, staring into the emptiness, trying to piece together the shattered fragments of my life. But somewhere in that darkness, I felt something flicker within me, a small, barely visible spark. It wasn't defeat. It wasn't the overwhelming sadness that had taken over me when I first realized what was happening. No, this spark was something else. It was anger. It was determination. They had taken everything from me, my home, my belongings, my dignity, but they hadn't taken my will to fight. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let them destroy me. I was done feeling like a victim. I was done being passive. I managed to make my way back to the city, feeling the weight of every step, but knowing that I had to keep moving. I didn't know where to go, or what to do, but I knew I couldn't go back to that penthouse. Not after what had happened. The place that had once felt like home now felt like a prison, haunted by betrayal. The first thing I did was reach out to someone I trusted.
Ethan.
He wasn't just a lawyer, he was an old college classmate. We had lost touch over the years, but when I needed someone, I remembered him. He was smart, dependable, and had become a successful lawyer. I didn't know where to start, but I knew that he could help me. When I called him, I could hear the concern in his voice even before I explained what had happened. "Kara, what's going on? You sound like you've been through hell." And I had. But there was no time to dwell on the past. I needed to focus on what came next. I told him everything, the inheritance, the documents, how Daniel's family had forced me out of the penthouse, and how Daniel had stood by, silent, letting it happen. He listened patiently, and then said something that gave me hope. "You're not alone in this, Kara. You have the right to fight for your home, your life. We can prove that those documents are fake. We'll take them to court. It was the first time since everything fell apart that I felt a glimmer of hope. Ethan was on my side.
He believed in me.
And that was all I needed to hear. We set to work quickly. I gathered every document I could find. My parents' will, the deed to the penthouse, and anything else that proved I was the rightful owner. I even made notes about what happened on that day, when Daniel's family barged in and forced me out. Every detail was important. I knew they were trying to take everything from me, but I wasn't going to let them. It was hard, emotionally, physically, mentally. Each day was a battle, as I tried to pick up the pieces of my life, and each new document I uncovered only fueled my anger. Daniel's silence still haunted me. How could he just stand there, letting his family tear my world apart? It was like he wasn't the man I had married. I couldn't make sense of it, and I didn't know if I ever would. I knew I had to file for divorce. As painful as it was, there was no way I could continue living with a man who had betrayed me so completely. I wasn't going to share a life with someone who allowed this to happen. It hurt more than I can say, but it was the right choice. I needed to sever all ties with him and take control of my life again. As Ethan worked on the legal paperwork, I focused on getting stronger, mentally, emotionally, physically. I had no idea how long this would take or how much it would cost, but I knew that I had to do this. It was no longer about just reclaiming the penthouse. It was about reclaiming my life. The penthouse was only a symbol. I wasn't just fighting for the property. I was fighting for my identity, my dignity, and my future. The court date loomed ahead, and with each passing day, I felt more nervous and determined. I was going to stand in front of that judge and tell them my story. I wasn't going to let Daniel's family take what was rightfully mine without a fight. I didn't care how much power they had or how deep their pockets went. I was ready to take this battle to the very end. But deep inside, I knew that this was only the beginning. The fight for my penthouse would soon become the fight of my life. The days leading up to the court hearing felt like an eternity. My mind was a constant swirl of emotions, anger, sadness, determination. But through it all, I held on to the one thing that mattered. I wasn't going to back down. I had come too far, fought too hard to give up now. Ethan had been a steady presence in my life during these dark times. He worked tirelessly on my case, gathering evidence, reviewing documents, preparing me for what I would face in court. His support was invaluable, and honestly, it made all the difference. He wasn't just my lawyer anymore. He was my rock. And through everything, I began to realize something. I wasn't just fighting for my home. I was fighting for me. I was fighting for my life, my future. The day of the hearing arrived, and I barely slept the night before. I was up early, going over my notes one last time, mentally preparing myself for what was about to come. I had to remain calm, focused. There would be no room for doubt. I stepped into the courtroom with my head held high, trying to project confidence, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. I couldn't help but glance around the room. There was Daniel, sitting with his family, his face a cold mask of indifference. My breath caught in my throat. How could he sit there, so detached, while his family had done all this to me? I thought I knew him, but the man I saw sitting there was a stranger. Eva and Claire were sitting beside him, their expressions twisted with resentment and arrogance. I could feel their eyes on me, their silent judgment. But I refused to let them intimidate me.
This wasn't about them.
This was about me and my right to stand up for what was mine. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up, my legs shaky but my voice steady. I told the court everything. The way Daniel's family had forced me out of my penthouse, the forged documents they had presented, the lies they had spread. I described in detail the day they had stormed into my home, how they had thrown my belongings out onto the street, and how Daniel had stood by, silent and unhelpful. Your Honor, I said, my voice trembling but determined, I have lived in that penthouse my entire life. It is not just a property, it is a part of me. It's filled with the memories of my parents, of everything I've lost. I refuse to let anyone take it from me. The silence in the room was deafening as I spoke. I could feel the weight of my words hanging in the air. And then I turned to Daniel. I locked eyes with him, and for the first time, I saw something flicker in his gaze. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't remorse. It was fear. He was scared, not of the consequences of his actions, but of losing me. But it was too late for that. As I finished my statement, I glanced over at Ethan, who gave me a small but reassuring nod. I knew I had done my best. The rest was in the hands of the judge. The judge's eyes never left me as I finished my testimony. He asked a few questions, then turned to Daniel and his family. The look on their faces was a mix of frustration and anger. They knew they had no leg to stand on. The evidence was clear. The documents were forged, and they had no claim to the penthouse. And then the judge spoke. The words I had been waiting for, the words that would change my life forever. After reviewing the evidence presented, the judge said, "I hereby declare that Kara is the rightful owner of the penthouse. The claims made by Daniel's family are false, and the documents provided were fraudulent." My heart leaped in my chest. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. I had won. The penthouse was mine. But the next part of the judge's ruling sent a chill down my spine. As for Daniel, the judge continued, he is found guilty of fraud, conspiracy, and attempting to illegally seize property. Based on the severity of these crimes, I am sentencing him to a long prison term. I didn't feel victorious in that moment. I felt hollow, like I had lost something irreplaceable. But I also felt something else, relief. The battle was over. For the first time in months, I could finally breathe. As I left the courtroom, Ethan was by my side, his presence grounding me. I had reclaimed my life, but it had come at a heavy price. Daniel's betrayal still stung, and the man I once loved was now facing the consequences of his actions. But I had won. I had taken control of my life again. It wasn't the end of the road, though. I knew that. I had a long way to go before I could fully heal, before I could truly move on. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could. It wasn't over, not yet. The judgment was delivered, and the case was settled, but my journey of healing had just begun. As I walked out of that courthouse, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had fought, I had won, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. But there was something else beneath the surface, a profound emptiness. The life I had once dreamed of with Daniel was gone. I couldn't deny it. No matter how much I had hoped to rebuild that connection, the truth was undeniable. Daniel was gone. I was done. The man I had loved, the man I had shared my life with, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. He had sided with his family, letting them take what was mine, and remained silent when I needed him most. The silence in the courtroom, his lack of remorse, his detachment, it told me everything I needed to know. But in that emptiness, something powerful began to grow. I was no longer just a victim. I wasn't the woman who had been forced into the car and left on a bridge, abandoned by the people I trusted. I had taken control of my life. I had reclaimed my penthouse. I had stood up for myself when everyone else turned away. I decided to focus on what mattered. I had a future to rebuild, and I wasn't going to let anyone or anything stand in my way. The penthouse, once a symbol of betrayal, was now my sanctuary. Slowly but surely, I began to renovate, transforming it into a place that was truly mine. I hired contractors, reimagined each room, and added touches that reflected who I was now, strong, independent, and ready for whatever came next. The place began to feel like home again, a safe space where I could heal, where I could be myself. Throughout all of this, Ethan was by my side. He had helped me fight this battle from the very beginning, but somewhere along the way, something else had blossomed between us. His support, his unwavering belief in me, it went beyond just the legal case. We spent more time together, talking late into the night, sharing stories of our past and hopes for the future. And in those quiet moments, I realized something important. I wasn't alone anymore. I had found a true partner in Ethan. It wasn't just about gratitude anymore. I had started to care for him deeply, and it was clear that he felt the same way. The connection we shared grew stronger, built on mutual respect and shared experiences. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was allowed to be happy again. Not just for myself, but with someone who truly understood me. One evening, As we sat together on the balcony of the penthouse, looking out at the city lights, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a long time. I had reclaimed more than just my property. I had reclaimed my sense of self, my dignity, and my future. And Ethan, who had helped me every step of the way, was there with me, not just as my lawyer, but as the man I had come to love. As the renovation on the penthouse neared completion, Ethan and I made a decision that would change everything. We got married. The place that had once felt like a battleground, a place filled with memories of betrayal, was now our home, a symbol of resilience, love, and the strength to overcome anything life throws at you. Looking out at the skyline that evening, I felt a deep sense of contentment. I had faced betrayal, and I had come out the other side stronger. My journey was far from over, but I knew that with Ethan by my side, we could face whatever the future held. The power to shape my destiny was mine, and no one could ever take that away from me again.